Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not crawling through medieval gutters or gnawing stale bread in a Victorian workhouse. No, your fate is heavier, louder, and far more suffocating. You are a German tank commander on the Eastern Front, stuffed into 60 tons of steel and wishful engineering. They tell you the Tiger is invincible, a fortress on tracks, feared by all who face it. What they do not tell you about is the taste of oil that never leaves your tongue, the hammering in your skull from the Maybach engine, or the way the air inside your invincibility turns stale before you've even reached the battlefield. Before we seal the hatch and rattle forward into snow, do me one small favour. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you'd prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you listen to these in bed, consider using a pair of wireless sleep earbuds for enhanced immersion. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed for side sleepers. I've linked my favourite pair in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. They do not give you much of a speech when you're told you will command a tiger. There is no grand ceremony, no roll of drums, no garland of laurels. A weary officer shuffles papers across a desk, stamps your name onto a form, and mutters something about honour and responsibility. It is all very perfunctory, as if they were assigning you not to one of the most feared machines of the war, but to a warehouse broom. Yet the implication hangs there nonetheless. To command a tiger is supposed to be a privilege. It means you're considered reliable, disciplined, trusted to wield something rare and expensive. It means you're now part of the mythology that propaganda has so carefully polished. The idea that German engineering can bend steel and fire into the shape of invincibility. You are congratulated with the barest nod, and then left to find your way to the motor pool, as though a legend was simply another item to be signed for and collected. You are no stranger to tanks. You have ridden in the rattling belly of a Panzer III and sweated through long days in a Panzer IV, cramped but familiar machines, whose quirks you know by heart. You have cursed their underpowered guns, coaxed their engines into life, and fought blind through narrow slits, always aware of how easily a Soviet shell could rip through their armour. You know the smell of burned fuel, the weight of steel closing in around you, the nervous shifting of men locked together in a box designed for destruction. You know what it is to command armour, to balance calculation and terror in equal measure. And yet, as you walk toward the tiger, you feel as though none of that experience quite prepares you for this. When you first see it, you understand why the myth took root. The tiger is less a tank than an iron cliff balanced on treads. Its sides are thick slabs of armour that glint dully in the one light, edges squared as if the machine had been carved from a single, immense block of stone. The barrel of its guns stretches forward like a spear, designed not for battle, but for intimidation. So long and out of proportion that it seems to sneer at the smaller vehicles parked beside it. Even sitting inert, its very bulk seems to command silence. Nearby mechanics work in subdued tones, as though to raise their voices would risk provoking it. This is the machine you're told will keep you alive, the machine you're told will send whole divisions of Soviet armour running. It radiates presence, the sort of presence that men write about in letters home to wives and children, who cannot imagine the scale. To approach it is to feel yourself diminish, to sense that you are a guest in something that was never designed for human comfort or frailty. The propaganda posters claim it is a wonder of modern warfare, a fortress on tracks, impervious to enemy fire, and able to cut down whole columns of tanks with casual efficiency. Standing before it, you realise how easily those words could be believed. The tiger dwarfs the Panzer IVs and battered half-tracks around it, hulking like some prehistoric beast among barnyard cattle. The stories of its thick armour are recited in every briefing. frontal plating that can shrug off most Soviet shells, side armour that still outclasses what many Allied tanks carry at the front. The gun is spoken of in reverent tones, the famed 88mm that can reach out and kill at distances where most enemies cannot even reply. Soldiers at the front whisper about it the way medieval villagers once whispered about dragons, terrible, but somehow reassuring if one fights on the side of the creature rather than against it. Yet as you draw closer, the ore begins to tarnish. You notice how the paint is already scuffed and dulled by transport, how streaks of grease mark the hinges of the hatches, how the tracks sag ever so slightly under the weight of the hull. It looks less like a marvel and more like a burden, less like a sword and more like an anchor. The Tiger does not gleam with perfection, but sweats with strain, as though it resents being asked to move at all. The officer who handed you your assignment mentioned nothing of these details. He did not mention the way the tank smells faintly of scorched oil, even while at rest, or the faint metallic tang that lingers in the air around it, a taste that coats your tongue before you have even set foot inside. He did not mention that the so-called honour of commanding one is also the weight of commanding 4 other men into a space the size of a cupboard, that their lives now hinge on your orders and on the stubborn machinery of this steel monster. Men from other units pass by and stare. They do not look at you. They look at the Tiger. Their eyes are drawn to it, as to some relic or idol. Their gazes a mixture of envy and relief that it is you, not them, who will have to live inside it. One mutters to another, and you catch fragments about invulnerability, about how a Tiger can cut down a T-34 at 2 kilometers, about how the Soviets scatter when one rolls into view. You say nothing because you know already that the men who praise it most are the ones who have never had to spend a night within it, never had to feel their ears ring from the endless vibration of its engine, or their skin sting from the chill of steel pressed close against their shoulders. They admire it as a symbol. You are condemned to admire it as a cell. The briefing officer's words echo in your mind as you walk around the tank's bulk, brushing fingers along the hard ridges of the armour. He had called it an honour. You wonder what sort of honour requires you to trade the sky for a strip of periscope glass, fresh air for fumes, and freedom of movement for the narrow confines of steel corridors. There is no nobility in a machine that can stall in mud as easily as a farm cart, or in a machine so heavy it requires half the fuel reserves of a company to reach the next village. Still, you cannot deny the shiver of awe that runs through you when you stand at the muzzle of the gun, staring up at a tube wide enough for a man's head. This weapon will kill, and it will kill cleanly, brutally, efficiently. It is only later that you will realise the price of being chained to such efficiency. The ground crunches beneath your boots as you complete the circuit around the Tiger. Every angle confirms the same truth. The machine is a monument, but a monument is not a home. Its bulk looms against the grey horizon, like a mausoleum awaiting its occupants. You imagine the sound of its tracks biting into snow, the echo of its gun firing, the cheer of infantry when it drives past. You imagine, too, the silence when it stops, broken down or struck, its crew trapped within. The contradiction is inescapable. This machine is both the promise of survival and the certainty of suffocation. To be given command of it is to be handed not a weapon, but a riddle with no solution. The air is still, your breath visible in the cold, and the Tiger waits. It does not breathe, but it seems to exhale anyway, metal ticking as it contracts in the chill, a faint groan as if settling under its own weight. Around you the camp moves on, soldiers hurrying to tasks, trucks coughing to life, orders shouted across the yard. The Tiger ignores them all. It is indifferent, massive, unmoved, and as you watch it, the realization grows inside you with the slow heaviness of dread. You are not about to command, a fortress. You are about to inhabit one. And fortresses, you remember, are designed as much to keep men in as to keep enemies out. You climb the side ladder, boots knocking against the cold rungs, and lower yourself into the mouth of the machine. The steel edge of the hatch scrapes your sleeve as you duck inside, the dim interior swallowing you whole. The moment your boots touch the floor plates, you're reminded of every tank you've ever served in. But this one feels closer, heavier, more suffocating than the rest. The air is already thick with grease, oil, and the faint metallic tang of steel. It is not the sharp sting of open air, but the dull, recycled flavour of a space meant to trap breath rather than refresh it. Your new crewmen look up as you descend, their expressions flickering briefly toward acknowledgement before they return to their small, repetitive tasks. Each man is absorbed in his own ritual, as if the only way to survive being locked inside this machine is to focus on some narrow thread of familiarity. The driver sits hunched in his corner, thin hands spread across the levers, his knuckles pale in the dim light. He strokes the controls like a farmer patting the neck of a mule, coaxing a stubborn beast to behave. You know his type well. He was quiet even in the Panzer IV, but now his silence feels heavier, as though he is storing up his words for the endless quarrels with the transmission he knows are coming. Beside him, the radio operator fiddles with his set, turning dials with exaggerated care. He mutters softly to himself, not words exactly, but fragments of syllables, half-spoken prayers to the wires and knobs. His headset crackles faintly with distant static, the ghosts of voices far away, and he leans into it as though it could offer a kind of companionship the tank cannot. Your gunner checks the elevation wheel, then checks it again. He is the most superstitious of the lot, a man who believes precision can be conjured by ritual. He touches the metal with his fingertips, wipes a patch of invisible dust from the sight, and adjusts the wheel one more time, though it has not shifted since the last. His jaw is set in that stubborn way you have come to recognise in men who must pretend calm. You know he will be steady in battle, not because he feels steady, but because he has built a cage of habits so rigid he dares not step outside them. The loader, meanwhile, crouches by the ammunition racks. He runs his fingers along the brass casings, tapping each one gently against the rack before settling it into place. The sound is soft but insistent, like a drummer marking time in a room where no music can ever be heard. He is young, younger than the others, and he tries to mask his nerves with energy. You can see the faint tremor in his hands when he thinks no one is watching. The five of you together do not fill the Tiger with life so much as with noise. There is the clink of metal on metal, the scrape of boots shifting against the floor plates, the faint hiss of breath through dry throats. It is the same orchestra you've heard in every tank you've commanded, but here the acoustics are different. The walls seem to close around the sound, amplifying it, magnifying it, until every tiny motion seems loud enough to be heard outside. The Tiger's armour, so thick and reassuring from without, becomes suffocating from within. The air does not move. The ceiling feels lower than it should. You are pressed so near to your men that you can smell their uniforms even before they have begun to sweat. Damp wool, stale tobacco, and the faint, lingering bite of rations carried in pockets combine with the omnipresent stench of oil and steel. It is an environment designed not to host men, but to consume them slowly, a crucible of fumes and nerves. You move into your position, brushing against shoulders and elbows, as you do. There is no graceful way to inhabit this space. Every movement requires some other man to shift, to tuck his arm, to lean away. It is an endless negotiation of limbs, each one begrudged, each one silently resented. You slide into place, headset wires tangling briefly before you manage to settle them against your collar. From here, the tank looks both vast and small. Vast in the sense of the firepower it contains, small in the sense that there is nowhere to stand, nowhere to stretch, nowhere to be apart from the breathing of others. You are commander in name, but inside this box, you're just another body pressed against the armour, another set of lungs stealing air from the finite supply. The gunner clears his throat, a dry rasp that seems too loud. The loader stops tapping shells and sits back, waiting for your words. The driver keeps staring straight ahead, hands hovering over his levers, as if bracing for a sudden lurch. The radio operator adjusts his headset and murmurs, half to you and half to himself. Lines quiet. It is not a report, not really. It is a small reassurance, a declaration that for now, in this moment, the world has not yet demanded your deaths. You nod, though the gesture is more for you than for them. There is no need for speeches here. The men know as well as you do that the tiger is no invincible saviour. They have heard the rumours, lived with the breakdowns, and they know the steel around them is as much coffin as protection. Words would only embarrass all of you. Instead, you allow the silence to build again, broken only by the faint clatter of the loader shifting ammunition, the gunner adjusting his sight one more unnecessary time, and the driver's heel tapping lightly against the floor as though to summon patience. You can feel the vibration of every movement through the armour, every sound carried through the steel. Even when no one speaks, you hear each other constantly. A cough reverberates like a drum beat. A sigh seems to echo through the plates. The tank amplifies intimacy until there is no boundary between your body and theirs, no privacy left in thought or gesture. You are a crew, yes, but you're also captives of the same prison. You glance up toward the hatch and see the thin rim of light spilling in from outside. It feels impossibly bright, impossibly clean, compared to the gloom inside. The outside world, even in its cold and mud, seems freer than the inside of this machine. You remember the Panzer IV, how cramped it had seemed at first, how over time it had grown familiar, even comforting in its way. You wonder if the Tiger will ever feel that way, or if its vast weight and reputation will always make it a place of exile rather than belonging. You wonder, too, how many days you will have to live like this before the light of the hatch becomes no more than a memory. The loader shifts again, brushing your boot with his knee. He mutters an apology, though there is no need. This will happen constantly, endlessly. There is no way to avoid it. You nod and let the matter drop. The gunner sighs quietly, perhaps at the sight in front of him, perhaps at nothing at all. The driver clenches his jaw, waiting for the inevitable struggle with the gears. The radio operator twirls his dial with delicate fingers, seeking meaning in static. Each man, in his own way, clings to ritual because ritual is the only shield against panic. There is no space for distraction, no room to escape into privacy. There is only the repetition of small familiar actions to hold back the weight of dread. The light from the hatch fades as someone outside shifts the cover. A chill breeze sneaks in, carrying with it the faintest taste of air, untainted by oil. The crew tilts their heads toward it unconsciously, as though drawn by instinct to the freshness they are already being denied. You inhale deeply, savouring it, though it is gone almost as quickly as it arrives. You feel the weight of what is about to happen, the weight of hours and days sealed into this compartment with these men. You remind yourself that you have done this before in other tanks, with other crews. You remind yourself that you can endure it again. But even as you do, you sense the truth settling over you. The Tiger is not like the others. It is larger, yes, but that largeness has only tightened the noose. The hatch seals with a metallic finality, and for a moment there is only the sound of your crew shifting in the gloom, their breathing rising and falling in uneven rhythm. Then, with a nod from you, the driver reaches forward and turns the starter. The effect is immediate. A deep cough echoes through the hull, followed by a churning grind, as though the machine is clearing its throat. Another attempt, another sputter, and then a roar that fills every crevice of the Tiger. It is less the sound of an engine, and more the bellow of some iron beast dragged unwillingly from slumber. The walls vibrate with it, your chest rattles with it, and for a moment you feel as though you're inside a drum being struck from all sides at once. The Maybach HL 230 is a temperamental thing, and already it protests. The roar becomes a high whine, then drops to a guttural growl, before surging again with a belch of black fumes. The loader swears under his breath, pressing a rag to his mouth as the stench of unburned petrol wafts through the compartment. The radio operator curls away slightly from his set, as though trying to preserve his equipment from the filth in the air. Your gunner tightens his grip on the elevation wheel, knuckles white, waiting for the shuddering to settle. The driver mutters to himself in low, clipped phrases, part curses, part coaxing. His hands work the levers with the tenderness of a man trying to soothe a nervous animal, but the Tiger does not make it easy. The gears grind like teeth snapping at one another, sharp metallic protests that ring through the compartment. Each clash of metal makes you wince, though you try not to show it. The floor plates beneath your boots begin to tremble as the vibration deepens. It is not the steady hum of a well-tuned machine, but a restless shiver that rises and falls unpredictably. You feel it through your legs, through your spine, through the back of your skull. The sensation is relentless, a reminder that every piece of your body is now tied to this beast's rhythms. Even when you close your eyes, the shudder remains, a kind of constant gnawing that will not let you forget where you are. The heat builds quickly, radiating from the engine bay. It is a damp, suffocating warmth that clings to your uniform and seeps into your skin. The air grows thicker, harder to breathe, and each lungful seems to carry with it a trace of burning oil. You remember the Panzer IV, how its engine had been noisy but predictable, its growl becoming almost companionable after long marches. The Tiger is different. This is not the sound of a companion, but of an adversary. It feels less like a machine waiting for your command, and more like one straining against you, daring you to test its limits. The sheer weight of it presses down on your imagination. Nearly 60 tons of steel, balanced on treads, all of it relying on this engine, this gearbox, this fragile chain of components that already seem close to failure. You can almost hear the strain in every bolt, every weld, every joint. The Tiger is alive, yes, but it is an animal that resents its rider. The stench becomes overwhelming. The fumes leak in from somewhere unseen, coiling through the cramped compartment until every breath tastes metallic and sour. Your tongue grows thick with it, as though coated with iron filings. You swallow, but it does nothing to rid you of the taste. Sweat beads along your temples, not from exertion, but from the thick air and the oppressive heat rolling off the engine. The crew begins to glisten in the dim light, their faces damp, their collars darkened with moisture. You can smell the wool of their uniforms mixing with the reek of petrol, the grease on their hands mingling with the acrid smoke. The loader wipes his forehead with his sleeve, leaving a streak of grime across his skin. The radio operator coughs softly, trying to mask it behind his hand, but the sound lingers in the confined space. The driver engages the clutch, and the Tiger bucks violently, the entire compartment lurching forward before slamming back again. Your shoulder strikes against the turret ring, and you grit your teeth to keep from cursing. The gunner steadies himself with one hand against the wall, his lips pressed into a thin line. The loader loses his balance momentarily, catching himself on the ammunition rack with a metallic clang that echoes in the gloom. The radio operator steadies his headset, muttering an oath as his dial slips under his fingers. The driver grimaces, muscles taut as he works the levers again, The gears grind once more, shrieking against one another in protest, and then, after a moment of resistance, they catch. The tank shudders forward another few inches before settling again, as though testing whether it will tolerate movement today. You can feel the collective tension in the crew. No one speaks, but every man knows what it means when the Tiger refuses to cooperate. You are not yet on the battlefield, not yet under fire, and already the machine strains at the very idea of movement. Each breakdown, each hesitation, is a reminder that the Tiger is not the invincible beast promised by propaganda, but a lumbering giant with weak ankles, one that could betray you at the worst possible moment. You can sense it in the set of the driver's jaw, in the loader's restless shifting, in the gunner's stubborn fixation on his sight, in the radio operator's endless adjustments. They all know the truth. The battle is not only against the Soviets, but against the Tiger itself. Another attempt, and the engine surges louder, rattling the walls until your teeth chatter. The vibrations travel up through the floor, into your legs, making every bone feel as though it is being loosened from its socket. You hold onto the edge of your seat, steadying yourself as the machine finally lurches with more determination. The treads clank against the ground, a heavy, uneven rhythm that fills the compartment with metallic echoes. Each clatter feels exaggerated, magnified by the armour around you, until it seems as though the entire world must hear the Tiger groaning to life. The loader closes his eyes briefly, whispering something too low to catch, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a curse. The gunner frowns, his fingers twitching against the wheel. The radio operator presses his headset tighter, as though trying to blot out the roar. The smell grows stronger with every second, an oppressive cocktail of burning petrol and hot metal. You can almost taste the fumes searing the back of your throat. Your stomach knots. Not from fear exactly, but from the nausea that coils in such airless conditions. You force yourself to focus, to keep your eyes on the instruments and your thoughts on the task. You cannot afford to look unsettled. The crew is watching, even if they do not show it. You give a nod to the driver, a silent command to push on. He exhales through his teeth, clenches the levers, and eases them forward with both hands. There is another grinding protest, sharper this time, and then a sudden, violent lurch. The Tiger shudders like a wounded animal, metal clashing against itself, before settling into a grudging crawl. The motion presses you against your seat, the vibrations jolting through every joint. Outside, unseen, the massive tracks begin their slow, clattering march, chewing at the frozen mud and crusted snow. Inside, you hear it as a steady rhythm, each link striking with a sound like a hammer on an anvil. The crew sways with the motion, shoulders colliding, boots scraping against the plates. There is no grace to the Tiger's movement, only brute insistence, as though the earth itself resists carrying such a weight. The compartment grows noisier with every metre. The engine bellows behind you, the transmission groans beneath you, and the tracks slam the ground with every step. Conversation becomes impossible without shouting, and even then words dissolve into the roar. You resort to gestures, to brief nods, to shared glances. Communication shrinks to its bare minimum, a language of survival rather than command. The loader braces himself against the ammunition racks, his eyes darting nervously, as if waiting for some fresh betrayal from the machine. The gunner presses his cheek against the sight, squinting through the narrow slit as though it will anchor him against the chaos. The radio operator sits rigid, headset clamped tight, his hand steady on the dial, though it trembles faintly from the vibration. The driver leans forward, every muscle taut, his body almost welded to the levers. The air is thick now, hot and sour, heavy with the stink of labouring machinery. It fills your lungs and coats your skin, and you know it will cling to you for hours after you climb out. You can feel the sweat trickling down your back, mixing with the grime of the uniform you have worn too long without washing. Every breath is a negotiation between necessity and disgust. You wonder how long you can endure it. How many hours of this will stretch before you see daylight again? The tiger, massive and immovable from without, feels more fragile from within, more like a cage that resists both movement and stillness. Then suddenly the resistance eases. The engine steadies to a deep growl, the gears catch, and the tiger begins to roll forward with more confidence. The floor plates still tremble, the fumes still bite at your throat, but the movement becomes more certain, more continuous. The crew shifts into the rhythm, their shoulders settling, their expressions tightening into something closer to resolve. You feel the inertia press against you, heavy and unyielding as the tiger lumbers onward. Outside, the world is shaking with its passage, snow crushed into slush beneath the tracks, frozen mud torn open by the steel links. You turn your attention to the slit of vision in front of you. It is hardly a window, more a wound in the steel that allows a narrow slice of the outside world to bleed in. Through it, the eastern front unfolds. Though unfolds is too generous a word for what little you can see. The slit frames everything like a poorly cut photograph, a strip of frozen earth, a smear of snow, the hunched outline of a tree trunk leaning away from the road. You shift slightly to catch another angle, but there is nothing more. The world beyond the armour is vast, but inside the tiger you see only fragments, slivers that do not quite connect into a whole. It is less like looking at reality and more like staring into a sequence of half-formed dreams. The land outside is locked in the grip of winter, though whether it is the tail end or the cruel beginning you cannot say. Snow lies in patches, some drifted high against the roots of trees, others thin enough to reveal the churned mud beneath. The road stretches forward in a line of ice-patched ruts, gouged deep by convoys of machines that have already passed this way. The horizon is little more than a blur of grey, sky and ground blending into one another with no distinction. Trees rise in skeletal ranks along the roadside, their branches bare and brittle, like the fingers of corpses reaching from beneath the earth. Here and there, a ruined village stumbles into view, its chimneys leaning, its roofs caved in under the weight of snow and neglect. The tiger crawls past them without pause, a silent witness to their desolation. From your slit, you see only a barn door swinging loosely on its hinges, a broken fence post, the trace of a fire long extinguished. The sound of the engine drowns out everything else. It is not the distant call of crows, not the moan of the wind through ruined rafters, not the silence of snow settling on branches. All of that is erased by the endless roar behind you, the vibration that rattles your bones. You try to imagine the stillness of the landscape, the hush of winter stretching across fields and woods, but you cannot hear it. The tiger imposes its own soundtrack on the world, one of grinding gears and protesting steel, of treads slamming down like hammers into the frozen earth. The land itself seems muffled, blurred, as though reality has been replaced by this constant mechanical dirge. Your view narrows further as the driver eases the tank around a bend. The slit shows you only what is directly in front of the machine. The sudden appearance of a frostbitten tree trunk, the jolt of a ditch filled with ice, the fleeting glimpse of a crow lifting off the ground in startled flight. You know there must be more out there, whole forests, villages, fields scarred by artillery, but to you they do not exist. You are blind to all but the narrow strip of road and ground that the tiger chooses to show you. In this way, the machine dictates your reality. You do not command it so much as you endure the version of the world it allows you to see. The crew feels the same. The gunner peers through his sight, seeing only the magnified edge of whatever crosses his narrow glass. The loader crouches near the shells, his world reduced to brass casings and steel racks. The radio operator bends over his set, hearing nothing but crackling static and the occasional burst of clipped instruction. The driver hunches forward, watching his slits for the hazards immediately ahead. Blind to the horizon, each of you is confined to your own tunnel, your own sliver of existence, none of which adds up to a true picture of the world outside. Together, you form a machine more than a crew, each man locked into his function, each function limited by steel walls. The smell of the outside never reaches you. There might be wood smoke drifting from a chimney in some half-ruined cottage, or the sharp bite of pine carried on the wind, or the faint, sweet rot of hay left to spoil in a collapsed barn. But none of that filters past the tiger's steel. What you smell is only the tank. Fuel, oil, sweat, breath, the acrid residue of old smoke baked into the interior. The land might as well be scentless, sterile, for all that reaches you here. You know it is not, but you are denied it, starved of it. What the world offers, the tank refuses to deliver. You try to imagine what the infantry see as you crawl past. To them, the tiger must look like a leviathan, a beast summoned from steel and fire, a promise of strength lumbering forward. They see the whole silhouette, the long gun, the tracks biting into snow. You envy them their vantage. You are commander in theory, yet they see more of your machine than you ever will. They are free to step aside, to look upon the landscape in its entirety. You are bound to a vision slit, your eyes reduced to keyholes. The infantry march in exhaustion and cold, but at least they march beneath the open sky. You, with all your supposed privilege, see the world as if through a coffin lid. The monotony of the road grinds into your mind. Each new stretch looks like the last. More snow, more mud, more skeletal trees. The engine drowns thought as much as it drowns sound. You try to remember how many hours you have been moving, but the vibration makes time meaningless. A minute feels like an hour like an endless cycle of jolts and fumes. The only markers are the villages you pass, each one as broken as the last, each one blurring into the next. You catch glimpses of collapsed roofs, shattered windows, fences buried under drifts. Sometimes a figure appears briefly, a woman hauling a bundle of wood, a child peering from a doorway, but they vanish as quickly as they came, swallowed by the slit, erased by the tank's passing. To you, they might as well not exist. The tiger groans with every turn of its tracks, each movement a negotiation with the land. When the road dips, you feel the machine strain, its gears grinding in protest. When it climbs, you feel the weight pressing down, the engine growling in anger. You cannot see the hill ahead until you're already on it, the slit revealing only a sudden tilt of horizon, a sudden jolt as the nose rises. The land is experienced only through reaction. The way the tank sways, the way the crew braces, the way the engine changes its tone. You do not observe the landscape. You feel it second-hand, filtered through the moods of the machine. The light outside shifts with the passing hours, though you perceive it only dimly. Sometimes the slit shows blinding white glare from snow. Sometimes a dull grey. Sometimes the faint suggestion of evening shadows. You lose track of whether it is morning, noon or dusk. The machine makes its own clock, measured in vibrations and fumes. You become less aware of the world and more aware of the tank itself. The clatter of the tracks, the growl of the engine, the stink of burning oil. The Eastern Front could be beautiful or hideous. You would not know. All you see is what the tiger allows, and the tiger allows very little. Eventually, the radio crackles with urgency. The calm static you have grown used to gives way to clipped, stuttering words, the hurried bark of orders relayed from somewhere ahead. The sound slices through the drone of the engine, barely audible over the noise, yet heavy with command. Contact reported, Soviet armor in the sector. The words hang in your ears, carrying with them the weight of inevitability. You straighten, tightening the straps of your headset, and glance at your men. They do not need your words. The shift in your posture tells them enough. This is what the Tiger exists for, what all the propaganda promised, the great weapon of the Reich, facing its prey. The driver stiffens, leaning closer to his slit, scanning for signs of movement ahead. The gunner grips the traverse wheel, sweat shining at his temple, eyes locked on the gloom through his sight. The loader crouches lower, his hand hovering near the shell racks, fingers twitching with restless energy. The radio operator leans into his set, straining to separate orders from static, words breaking apart like ice flows on a river. The compartment, already close, now shrinks further, thick with anticipation. You feel the vibration of the engine under your boots, the rattle of the tracks echoing through the plates, the air alive with heat and fumes. The Tiger is not calm, not composed but restless, its growl deepening, as if sensing the fight to come. Then through the slit you catch it, the brief silhouettes of movement against the tree line, low and fast, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. Another follows, a darker shape against the snow, accompanied by the faint shadow of exhaust smoke curling into the air. T-34s. Their shapes are unmistakable, smaller than your Tiger, sleeker, more agile, but no less lethal. For a moment, your breath catches. You have faced them before in a Panzer IV, and you remember well the helplessness of seeing their shells punch through your armour, the desperate manoeuvring, the frantic prayers for a ricochet. But this time, you are told things are different. This time, you sit inside a Tiger. This time, you are meant to be the predator. The order comes through the headset, crackling and harsh. Engage. You repeat it automatically, your own voice strange to your ears, muffled by the roar around you. The gunner aligns his sight, the loader grabs the shell with both hands, and the cramped compartment explodes into motion. The shell is heavy, ungainly in the close quarters, brass scraping against steel as the loader wrestles it into position. His shoulders knock against the racks, his breath ragged, but he slams it home with a final metallic clunk that reverberates through the turret. The gunner steadies himself, hands tightening, breath held. You press closer, headset biting into your ears, waiting for the moment. The recoil when the gun fires is like being inside a thunderclap. The entire tank lurches, the roar deafening, the air instantly choked with acrid fumes. Your ears ring, your teeth rattle, your chest feels struck by an invisible hammer. The slit before you flashes with fire, then smoke, and in the instant afterward, you see it. The T-34 in the distance, struck mid-hull, bursting apart in a fireball that sends debris tumbling through the air. One shell, one kill. It is as the propaganda promised, as the engineers bragged, as the whispers claimed. For a heartbeat, you feel it. The myth, the invincibility, the terrible power of this machine. For the first time since climbing inside, the Tiger does not feel like a cage, but like a throne. The loader grins through the sweat on his face, already reaching for another shell. The gunner exhales, a long, slow breath of satisfaction, eyes still pressed to his sight. The driver mutters something under his breath, a word half lost to the roar, but carrying the edge of relief. The radio operator, pale but focused, reports the kill with mechanical precision, his voice trembling despite his effort to keep it level. In this brief moment you all feel it together. The sudden rush of superiority, the intoxicating sense that perhaps the stories were true, that perhaps the Tiger really is more than steel and fumes, that perhaps it can make you untouchable. But the moment does not last. The gunner shifts his sight, and at once his shoulders stiffen. More movement ahead, more shadows between the trees. A line of them now. dark shapes advancing, their tracks carving new scars into the snow. The loader drags the next shell into place, his hands clumsy with urgency, sweat darkening his collar. He rams it home, his breathing ragged, his lips moving in muttered fragments of prayer or profanity. The gunner adjusts, straining against the traverse wheel, but the Tiger resists. The turret moves, but it moves slowly, ponderously, as though through molasses. The gunner grunts, muscles tight, turning the wheel, with steady force, but the Soviet tanks are faster, darting across his vision before he can line them properly. You lean forward, headset buzzing with overlapping orders, static laced with panic. Enemy numbers greater than expected, flank movements reported. You shout a command, your own voice hoarse, telling the gunner to adjust, telling the loader to keep pace. But the Tiger lumbers, slow to respond. The traverse is not the quick, clean pivot of a smaller tank. It is the drag of a mountain shifting against its own weight. The enemy knows it. The Soviets move fast, zigzagging, circling, never offering the perfect shot for long. The gunner curses under his breath, grinding the wheel, trying to catch them before they slip away. The loader is already red-faced with exertion, hauling the next shell. Each one feels heavier than the last in the cramped space. His back strikes against the racks, his knee knocks against the plates. His knuckles bleed where they scrape against steel. He jams the shell home again, the metallic thud echoing like a drum beat. But it takes time, always more time than you wish it did. Seconds stretch into eternities as the Soviets close distance. You watch through your slit, jaw clenched, as another T-34 races into position, its gun flaring, the shell sparking harmlessly against your frontal armor. The Tiger shrugs it off, but the jolt reverberates through you all the same. The gunner finally aligns, firing again, another roar, another burst of fire and smoke. This time, the shell punches clean through, and the enemy tank collapses into flames. For a moment, satisfaction surges again, but it is tempered now, thinner, edged with unease, because you can see how quickly they move, how many more of them appear from the tree line. The Tiger kills. Yes, but it kills slowly. Every reload is an ordeal, every traverse a struggle, every shot bought with seconds that feel like minutes. The machine delivers destruction, but it delivers it reluctantly, as if reminding you that its legend must be paid for in sweat and delay. The driver shifts uneasily, his hands tense on the levers, muttering about position, about the ground beneath the tracks. The radio operator stammers into his set, the words disjointed, lost in static. The loader pulls another shell, his arms trembling with fatigue already. The gunner hisses through clenched teeth as he cranks the traverse again, sweat dripping from his brow. You can feel the energy of the compartment change, the rush of the first kill already soured by the grinding pace of reality. The Tiger is powerful, yes, but it is also slow, ponderous, demanding. The enemy knows it, and you know it too. Through your slit you watch as the battlefield fills with movement. Dark shapes circling, darting, multiplying. The snow erupts with fire and smoke. The air shudders with the roar of engines and guns. Your machine groans and clatters. Every shell it fires a triumph, but also a reminder of delay, of fragility, of how easily speed can overwhelm strength. The propaganda promised invincibility. The first shot almost made you believe it. But now, as the loader strains with another shell, and the turret drags its way toward another target, you feel the illusion begin to crumble. You survive your first engagement. The smoke still lingers in your nostrils long after the battle ends. Your ears are still ringing from the recoil. You still feel rattled by the shock of each shot. But outside the Tiger, the story is already taking shape. Infantrymen who watched from the ditches whisper with awe about how you destroyed Soviet tanks as if it were nothing. Their voices carry down the frozen road as they speak of the Tiger's power, of its invincibility, of how the Soviets scattered once the first T-34 burst apart in flames. By the time you climb out of the hatch to gulp down a breath of cold air, you can hear the tone of admiration settling into their words. It is the same tone you've heard before, in the mouths of propagandists, a note of reverence, almost of worship. They do not mention the sluggish traverse, the endless grinding as the gunner fought to bring the sight into alignment. They do not speak of the loader's red face, his trembling arms, the sweat pouring down his back as he wrestled with shells that grew heavier with every round. They do not remember the seconds stretched into eternities between each shot, the way the Soviets darted back and forth like wolves harrying a wounded bear. No one outside your steel box noticed how close it all felt to collapse. To them, it looked like effortless supremacy. To you, it felt like wrestling with a machine determined to fight you as fiercely as it fought the enemy. You are back on the move later that day. Now some miles into the march toward another village, reduced to name and ruin, the Tiger decides to have mechanical issues. It begins subtly, with a groan that seems deeper than usual, a vibration that rattles in your teeth in a way you have not felt before. The driver mutters something under his breath and adjusts the levers, but the sound grows louder, more insistent. The engine's growl turns uneven, coughing out bursts of noise as if struggling for breath. The compartment fills with the smell of scorched oil, thick and bitter, clinging to the back of your throat. You exchange a glance with the gunner, though neither of you speaks. The machine is speaking loudly enough on its own. Then comes the jolt, sudden and violent, a wrenching shudder that throws the crew against the walls. The Tiger lurches forward, then stalls, its tracks biting uselessly into frozen mud. The roar of the engine sputters into silence, replaced by a heavy stillness, broken only by the hiss of settling metal. For a moment, no one moves. The silence feels alien after so many hours of constant vibration, and it presses in on you like a weight. The driver sits frozen, his hands gripping the levers, his knuckles pale. The loader stares at the floor, sweat and grime streaking his face despite the cold. The gunner breathes heavily, his hands still gripping the traverse wheel, though there is nothing to traverse. The radio operator fiddles nervously with his dials, as if expecting to hear an explanation from the static. You climb out into the open air, the hatch scraping against its hinges, and the cold rushes over you in a wave so sharp it feels like punishment. The snow stings your face, the wind knifes through your uniform, and your lungs seize with the sudden shock of air, untainted by fumes. Behind you, the crew follow one by one, their breath streaming in pale plumes. The Tiger squats in the road, inert and hulking, steam curling from its exhausts in defeated wisps. Its great barrel points uselessly at the tree line. Its armour glints dully under a weak winter sun, and for all its reputation as invincible, it looks now like nothing more than a stranded cart, too heavy to move. The driver kneels beside the hull, pulling off a glove to touch the frozen steel, his fingertips recoiling from the cold. He mutters a curse and pries open a panel, the hinges squealing. The smell that rushes out is foul, burnt oil mixed with something acrid, a stench of machinery wounded in ways it cannot hide. The mechanics were right. The oil has thickened into sludge in the cold, frozen stiff where it should have flowed. The transmission, strained past reason, has seized. The driver's shoulders slump as he stares into the guts of the machine. You crouch beside him, peering into the dark compartment of gears and pipes, and you feel the weight of futility settle on your chest. The crew begins the ritual of repair, though ritual feels too dignified a word for what it is. Scraping ice from hardened lines, hammering at stubborn bolts with numb fingers, cursing as tools slip from frozen hands into the mud. The loader, strong from hauling shells, throws his weight against a wrench, his breath steaming as he grinds his teeth with effort. The gunner kneels in the slush, sleeves rolled back, his skin turning raw as he digs grease from clogged fittings. The radio operator fetches tools from the stowage box, his lips blue, his muttered oaths punctuated by shivers. Even you, Commander in theory, join in, because there is no command without labour when the tiger refuses to move. The rank of officer means little when you're on your knees in snow, your fingers blackened by oil, your body bent over a machine that weighs more than a village of men. The cold seeps into everything. Your boots sink into half-frozen mud that oozes with each step, icy water seeping through seams and numbing your toes. Your gloves stiffen, crusted with frost and grease, and each movement sends needles of pain into your fingers. The wind does not relent. It drives flakes of snow into your eyes, lashes your skin, fills every exposed crack in your uniform with icy knives. You can hear your men grunting with the strain, their voices hoarse, their breath hitching with cold. Each sound is swallowed by the vast, indifferent silence of the forest around you. Only the groan of tools and the curses of freezing men break the stillness. The tiger looms above you all the while, watching silently as you labour, its steel plates mocking you with their chill. To the infantry, who once whispered in awe of it, the machine would look the same as always, huge, powerful, immovable. They would not see the sludge congealed in its veins, the gears worn thin by weight they cannot bear, the men who crawl around it like ants trying to wake a dying beast. They would not see you scraping ice with your fingernails, oil soaking into your skin, sweat freezing on your brow. They would see only the legend while you endure the truth. At last, after hours of effort, after blows that bruise knuckles and breaths that burn lungs, the driver manages to coax the machine into grudging cooperation. The engine coughs, sputters, then roars again, belching smoke into the frozen air. The sound does not bring triumph, only exhaustion. You all collapse back into your positions, boots caked with mud, uniforms stiff with frost and oil. Inside the compartment, the air is thick with fumes once more, the warmth returning but bringing with it the choking stench of burning fuel. The loader rubs his raw hands together, blowing on them in vain. The gunner wipes a smear of grease from his cheek, leaving a darker streak in its place. The driver flexes his fingers, cracked and bleeding, before gripping the levers again. The radio operator mutters a prayer as he settles his headset over ears still aching from the cold. The tiger shudders forward once more, tracks clattering as they bite reluctantly into the road. You feel the vibration beneath your boots, the engine's growl reverberating in your chest, and you know the machine is moving again only because you forced it to. There is no confidence in the sound, no reassurance. It is the roar of an animal that has been beaten back to life, but will collapse again the moment it chooses. The crew glance at one another with weary eyes, none daring to voice the thought, but all knowing it nonetheless. This is not the last time. The tiger will betray you again. You settle back into your seat, headset pressing against your temples, the vision slit offering the same narrow glimpse of the endless road ahead. Snow falls lightly now, flakes drifting lazily, settling against the glass. To any who watch from the outside, the tiger looks once more like a monster come to life, its barrel stretching forward, its tracks grinding powerfully through the mud. To those inside, it feels fragile, temporary, uncertain. The machine is moving, yes, but only because of sweat and curses, only because men broke themselves to patch its wounds in the cold. As the road unwinds once more beneath the tracks, the illusion resumes for those who will see it from afar. They will whisper again of invincibility, of armour too thick to pierce, of power that cannot be stopped. They will never know how long the tiger sat crippled in the snow, how close it came to becoming another frozen hulk abandoned on the roadside. They will not taste the oil in your mouth, feel the sting in your cracked hands. To them, the tiger will remain a legend. To you, it is only a machine that fights hardest against its own crew. The driver shifts in his seat, the levers groaning, the gears grinding reluctantly into place. You hear the machine strain again, already murmuring its next complaint. The loader sighs, rubbing his aching shoulders. The gunner mutters about alignment, already dreading the turret's sluggish turn. The radio operator scratches at the frost gathering along the rim of his set. You close your eyes briefly, just long enough to feel the weight pressing down. The Tiger is moving, yes, but it is a reprieve, not a victory. You know it will fail again, and perhaps next time it will not be on a lonely road with hours to labour in the cold. Perhaps it will be in the middle of battle, with shells whistling overhead and Soviet guns advancing. And when that moment comes, you will discover just how little separates invincibility from ruin. Forests give way to fields, fields to scattered villages, and then the crackle in the headset returns. Contact once more. This time, there is no awe in the voice, no sense that the mere presence of tigers will scatter the enemy. The tone is clipped, urgent, stripped of illusions. When the Soviets appear, they do not hesitate. They no longer scatter like startled deer at the sight of your tank's silhouette. Instead, they advance with grim determination, as if they have learned that the Tiger bleeds like any other machine. T-34s swarm across the fields, their smaller frames darting over frozen furrows and churned earth with unsettling agility. Their engines snarl, their turrets swing quickly, their guns flare with fire. You see them through the slit, shapes multiplying against the horizon. Dark shadows moving with speed that makes your turret feel all the more sluggish. You bark an order, the gunner cranks furiously, the loader heaves another shell into the breach, but already the Soviets are fanning out, circling, never offering a clean target for long. The first shells clang against your armour, loud enough to make your teeth rattle, but not yet penetrating. Each strike reverberates through the compartment, the sound metallic and sharp, a blow against your very bones. The gunner grunts, aligns and fires, the recoil smashing through the turret as another T-34 erupts in flame. For a moment, there is triumph, but it is fleeting. Because even as one burns, 3 more move in to replace it. Their guns spit fire, their tracks grind furrows into the snow, and you feel the creeping sense that you are not the hunter here, but the hunted, a beast hemmed in by wolves who know its weaknesses. Then come the infantry. You spot them through the slit, running low across the fields, rifles slung, bundles in hand. Anti-tank rifles glint in the dim light, their operators kneeling in snow to fire at your flanks. The rounds ping harmlessly against your frontal armour, but you know too well that a lucky shot at the tracks, the turret ring, or the engine deck could cripple you. Others carry mines, awkward shapes cradled like infants, their silhouettes darting between wrecks and furrows. As they close the distance, still more crouch in ditches, waiting for their chance to swarm you if you stall. The Tiger's armour is thick, yes, but armour does nothing against a horde with patience and numbers. Inside, the loader curses as he hauls another shell, his face red, sweat dripping into his collar despite the cold outside. His arms shake as he slams the round into place, the clang ringing through the compartment. The gunner hisses through clenched teeth, turning the traverse wheel with all his strength, but the turret lags, dragging slowly while the Soviets dance in and out of sight. The driver mutters furiously, wrestling the levers as the Tiger lumbers forward, each movement heavy and reluctant. The radio operator shouts into his set, his words barely cutting through the static, his hands trembling as he reports the encirclement. And you, pressed into your seat, grip the edge of the hatch ring, your knuckles white, issuing orders that feel more like pleas. The Soviets are not reckless. They have learned. They strike from multiple angles, never lingering in one place long enough to give you comfort. Their shells ping and spark, some glancing off, others digging deep scars into your armour. The noise is a constant assault, metallic screams that leave your ears ringing and your heart pounding. You fire again, another kill, Another T-34 bursting into fragments. But each victory feels smaller, cheaper, because it changes nothing. The swarm remains, the pressure unrelenting. For every tank you destroy, 2 more seem to appear, their turrets already turning, their guns flashing fire across the field. The loader groans with the effort of lifting another shell, his movements slower now, his breath ragged, his hands shake, his body sagging with fatigue. The gunner curses him under his breath, demanding speed, but you know the truth. No man can sustain such labour for long in the suffocating heat of the Tiger. The driver shouts suddenly, jerking the machine to one side, and you all lurch as the tank sways violently. A mine had been spotted just ahead, half buried in the snow, and for a moment you imagine the Tiger frozen, crippled, swarmed by men with grenades and petrol. The image lingers in your mind, heavier than the reality of the near miss. The compartment reeks of sweat and smoke, of grease and powder, of men burning their strength against an uncooperative machine. Each shot feels slower, each reload more laboured, each traverse more desperate. The Soviets know it. They press closer, their confidence clear in their movements. They do not see a god of war, a legend made of steel. They see a lumbering beast with joints that creak, a giant that cannot keep pace with their speed. They are adapting, and adaptation is as deadly as any shell. A round strikes the side armour with such force that the entire tank shudders, the sound like a hammer against a bell. You bite back a curse, your jaw aching from the vibration. The driver growls, forcing the Tiger forward, its tracks chewing at the snow, the gears grinding in protest. You feel the machine straining, the engine bellowing, the whole compartment trembling with effort. Another shell glances off the turret, sparks flashing in your narrow vision slit, leaving a jagged scar in the paint. The gunner fires again, and another Soviet tank burns, but the circle does not break. You can feel the dread rising, thick and sour, more suffocating than the fumes. It is the realization that the Tiger's armour and gun are not enough, that the Soviets are no longer awed into retreat. They have learned your machine's weaknesses, its sluggish turn, its greedy appetite for fuel, its constant thirst for repair, its dependence on human muscles that tire faster than machines. They do not need to destroy you outright. They only need to surround you, harry you, outlast you. And you, for all the Tiger's size, feel smaller with each passing moment. The loader drags another shell from the rack, his face contorted with pain as he lifts it. The gunner curses again, turning the wheel with aching arms, sweat running into his eyes. The driver growls like a man possessed, yanking the levers, trying to drag the Tiger through the mire of shells and smoke. The radio operator shouts into the void, his voice hoarse, his words lost in static. You add your own voice to theirs, barking orders, forcing calm into your tone, but inside you feel the same as they do. The Soviets are adapting, and each minute that passes brings you closer to the moment when they will adapt faster than you can respond. At last, after what feels like hours compressed into heartbeats, the Soviets falter. Whether it is a lull in ammunition, a regrouping of their lines, or sheer exhaustion, you do not know. The pressure eases, the shapes retreating into the tree line, smoke curling from the wrecks you managed to leave behind. The field is scarred with craters, littered with debris, dotted with flames that crackle faintly against the snow. You sit back against your seat, sweat cooling on your skin, chest heaving with ragged breaths. The loader slumps, arms trembling. The gunner lets his hands fall from the wheel, his face pale with fatigue. The driver leans forward, shoulders shaking. The radio operator pulls his headset away, massaging his temples. The Tiger is still alive. You are still alive. But there is no triumph here, only a relief, bitter and thin. You know, with a certainty that gnaws at your stomach, that this is how it will be now. The Soviets no longer scatter at your presence. They come at you with numbers, with mines, with rifles, with patience. They have adapted. And though your tank has survived this time, you feel it in your bones that each encounter is drawing closer to the one that will finish you. The days blur into one another, smearing like oil across a floor plate. You no longer mark them by the sun, which you rarely see, but by the rhythm of the tank itself, when it shudders to life, when it growls in motion, when it finally stalls into a silence that is never true silence. The interior is the same no matter the hour. It stinks of sweat, stale breath, fuel, oil, and damp uniforms that never dry. The smell clings to you like a second skin, seeping into every pore until you cannot remember what clean air feels like. You breathe it in your sleep. You taste it when you wake, and it rides on your clothes when you climb briefly out into the cold. Even then, the wind only sharpens the odour rather than replacing it. A reminder that no matter where you go, the tank clings to you. You try to sleep because you must. There are stretches when the Tiger halts, too drained of fuel to continue, or forced into stillness while the mechanics work their rituals yet again. In those moments, you curl where you can, pressed against steel that never warms. The floor plates vibrates with a ghost memory of the engine even when it is off, as if your bones still hum from the motion. You wedge yourself between racks and bulkheads, sometimes with your back against a wall, sometimes with your knees drawn up to your chest, because there is no room to stretch. Sleep is shallow, brittle, a thing broken by the cough of another man, by the drip of condensation pattering from the ceiling, by the faint hiss of metal cooling. Your men do the same. The loader curls like a child beside the ammunition, his head resting against brass casings that press into his skull. The gunner dozes upright, chin on his chest, his fingers twitching unconsciously against the traverse wheel, even in rest. The driver slumps in his seat, one hand still on the lever, as though the tank will lurch the moment he lets go. The radio operator lies with his headset still pressed to his ears, static hissing faintly like a lullaby that never ends. Their breathing fills the compartment, sometimes in sync, sometimes staggered, but always present. There is no moment when you are not aware of it, no moment when you are alone. The walls do not allow you to forget where you are. They press close on every side, unyielding, steel that sweats in the cold and burns in the heat. The air grows heavy with moisture as men breathe into it, then dries into a choking haze when the engine roars to life again. Your skin prickles with every shift in temperature, damp and clammy 1 hour, parched and raw the next. You run your hand along the walls sometimes, almost without realizing, and feel the condensation slick under your fingers, the rivets rough against your skin. You remind yourself it is armor, protection, but it feels more like the walls of a coffin. Claustrophobia worms its way into your mind slowly, not in a sudden rush, but in creeping moments. You catch yourself staring too long at the hatch, fixating on the thin line of light that seeps in when it's cracked. You feel your chest tighten when another man shifts closer, his knee pressing against yours, his breath hot against your shoulder. You try to ignore it, to focus on discipline, but the thought grows that you are trapped, that there is no escape, that the walls will never open again. Sometimes, when you close your eyes, you imagine them shrinking, pressing inward, squeezing the breath from your lungs. You open your eyes quickly, but the feeling lingers all the same. The men grow irritable as the days stretch. Small things spark tension. A careless elbow knocking against another's ribs. A muttered word mistaken for insult. A sigh held too long in silence. Arguments flare, quickly muffled, but never resolved. The loader grumbles at the gunner's endless rituals. The gunner snaps at the loader's clumsiness. The driver curses them both for being too loud when he tries to sleep. The radio operator withdraws into his static, mumbling responses, his eyes hollow. You speak when you must, trying to anchor them, but your own patience frays as thin as theirs. Authority means little in the confines of steel. Here, tempers hold more sway than rank. Superstitions creep in, filling the gaps where logic falters. The loader refuses to touch the second shell in the rack after a near miss, muttering that it is cursed. The gunner insists on tapping the traverse wheel 3 times before every engagement, swearing it keeps the mechanism from locking. The driver spits into his glove before grasping the lever, a ritual he performs without explanation. Even the radio operator, whose world is static and broken words, has begun humming under his breath whenever he adjusts the dials. They are all men of training, drilled in procedure and discipline, yet here in the suffocating dark they cling to fragments of ritual like charms. You do not discourage it, you understand it too well. Superstition is sometimes easier than admitting helplessness. Your body wears down as the days accumulate. Sleep, when it comes, never restores. Your muscles ache from tension, your joints stiffen from cramped positions. Your back protests every time you shift against the unyielding walls. Your skin itches with grime, layers of sweat and grease that never wash away. Your eyes burn from smoke and sleeplessness, the world narrowing to the slit of vision before you. You catch yourself blinking too often, trying to clear the blur that never leaves. Fatigue settles into your bones, deeper than hunger, heavier than thirst. It becomes a constant companion, a quiet voice reminding you that each day erodes you further. Night offers no reprieve. The taiga becomes an iron tomb when the engine falls silent, the air cooling until frost forms along the walls. Your breath condenses into mist, hanging in the compartment until it freezes and falls in faint drips. The darkness is absolute, broken only by the faint glow of instruments or the ember of a cigarette smouldering briefly in the gunner's hand. You lie in your corner, knees tucked tight, your ears filled with the chorus of breathing and occasional groans. The silence outside is vast, indifferent, yet you feel none of it. You feel only the closeness of men pressed shoulder to shoulder, the weight of the tank pressing in from all sides, the knowledge that you are buried alive in steel. Dreams do come, but they are thin, brittle, and cruel. You dream of fresh air, of open fields, of standing beneath the sky with nothing above you but clouds. You dream of walking freely, of stretching your arms without striking steel, of hearing nothing but the wind. But the dreams sour quickly. The air grows tainted, the fields shrink into corridors, the sky lowers into a lid of steel. You wake with a start, heart pounding, only to find yourself exactly where you began, surrounded by the stink of sweat and fuel, the walls pressing in just as before. Sleep becomes another cruelty, promising escape but delivering only reminders of your prison. Your crew begins to show the same hollowness. Their eyes grow ringed with shadows, their movements slower, their patience frayed. The loader's hands tremble, even when he's not lifting shells. The gunner mutters to himself, lines of nonsense stitched between prayers. The driver twitches in his sleep, jerking awake as though struck by an unseen blow. The radio operator stares blankly at his set, sometimes listening to static long after transmissions have ended, as though the noise itself has become a substitute for human voice. They are not broken, not yet, but they are wearing down, chipped slowly by confinement and fatigue, eroded by hours that stretch without end. You tell yourself it is temporary, that rest will come when the next halt arrives, that perhaps the next march will be shorter, the next engagement lighter, but you know better. There is no true rest here, no respite from the taiga. The machine demands endurance, and endurance is all you have left to give. Every breath is shared air, every motion a reminder of the steel that imprisons you. Every hour another fragment of yourself, lost to fatigue. You doze despite yourself, head slumping against the wall, breath rasping shallowly in your throat. The rhythm of the engine lingers in your bones, even in its absence, and you drift in and out of half-dreams. Time loses shape. You are not sure whether minutes or hours pass. Then suddenly, the world outside intrudes. A distant thud echoes faintly through the steel, followed by another, closer, sharper. Artillery. The sound is muffled, but it carries through the armour all the same, rattling bolts and stirring condensation from the ceiling. You jolt awake, your heart racing, eyes wide in the gloom. Around you, the others stir as well, groggy, muttering, their exhaustion too heavy to mask. You look toward the hatch, as though expecting the world outside to burst in at any moment. The truth settles heavily once more. There is no rest here, not in the Tiger, not anywhere. The distant artillery that shook you awake does not fade. Instead, it becomes part of a new rhythm, another background to the orders that filter down into your headset. You brace yourself for instructions about enemy armour, for news of another Soviet push, for something that makes sense within the logic of steel against steel. But what comes is different. It is a target list, blunt and efficient, delivered in clipped tones that allow no hesitation. Fire upon a village suspected of harbouring partisans. Level the buildings. Silence all movement. The words hang in your ears, sharp and metallic. And though no one says it plainly, you know what it means. Civilians will be caught in the blast. For a moment, you close your eyes, pressing the headset tighter, as if the static might drown the words. Your stomach knots in quiet protest, a flicker of the man you once were rising for a brief instant. You have marched through villages before, seen women hauling water, children playing in the rubble, old men hunched on benches, staring with hollow eyes. Now those same images form in your mind, but your hands rest on the steel rim of a machine that allows no protest. The Tiger is not designed for refusal. Its gun points where you tell it. Its shells obey when loaded, and once the order has entered your ears, it coils itself around your will like a chain. You repeat the command out loud, your own voice sounding flat. Foreign. The loader hesitates for only a breath, then hauls the shell from the rack, brass scraping against steel as he forces it into place. His face is pale, his eyes shadowed, but his movements are steady. The gunner lowers his sight, his hands tightening on the traverse wheel, the turrets swinging slowly toward the coordinates. The driver adjusts the levers, the tank groaning as it angles into position. The radio operator, silent, scribbles notes into his log, though his pencil shakes slightly with each stroke. None of them say anything. None of them need to. In the Tiger, orders are as inescapable as the steel walls themselves. The first shot leaves the barrel with its usual violence, the recoil shuddering through the hull, the roar deafening. You see it in fragments through your slit. A flash of impact, the sudden bloom of smoke, a roof collapsing in on itself. For a brief moment there is silence, then the faint shapes of figures scattering. Too small to be soldiers, too slow. You tell yourself you cannot be certain, that the distance and the haze obscure the truth. But deep down, you know. The Tiger does not discriminate, and neither, it seems, can its crew. The loader fetches another shell without being asked. The gunner aligns, the turret groaning. Another round slams into the village, a wall collapsing outward, dust rising in choking clouds. You do not hear screams over the roar of the engine, the grinding of gears, the echoes of your own gun, but you imagine them anyway. The human mind fills silence with what it expects, and you expect terror. You grip the edge of the hatch rim harder, knuckles white, telling yourself this is war, that this is survival, that orders leave no room for conscience. And yet, in the pit of your stomach, you feel something sour growing, heavier than fatigue, more corrosive than fear. The routine continues. The loader drags shells with a mechanical rhythm, his muscles trembling from effort, but his face blank. The gunner no longer curses at the slow traverse. He cranks with grim patience, his eyes glazed with exhaustion. The driver steadies the machine, as if it matters little where it goes, as long as it remains standing. The radio operator whispers into his set, recording reports, his tone flat, detached. They all move like parts of the machine, no longer distinct men, but extensions of steel. The violence becomes mechanical, each order followed with the inevitability of gears turning, each shell another click in a process that feels unstoppable once begun. You tell yourself you're only obeying, that to resist would mean disobedience, punishment, perhaps execution. But the truth gnaws deeper. The tiger itself enforces obedience. The moment you sit inside, sealed from the world, your choices narrow to levers and dials, to traverse wheels and firing mechanisms. The machine transforms orders into action before morality can interfere. By the time you imagine refusal, the loader has already shoved another shell into the breach. The gunner has already found his line. The driver has already set the angle. You are not deciding. You are witnessing. The tiger makes your silence complicit, and it is easier to let the machine finish what it has started than to try and stop it. The village burns in fragments through your vision slit. Roofs collapse, smoke pours upward, snow darkened by soot and ash. You catch glimpses of figures fleeing, some stumbling, some crawling, some too small to move quickly. The gunner does not pause. The loader does not falter. You do not stop them. The roar of the engine masks all else, the vibrations shaking the compartment until it seems the tiger itself is laughing with cruel mirth. You lean forward, issuing the next command, your voice hoarse, cracked, sounding to your own ears like someone else. As the shells diminish, the loader slower now, the gunner weary, the driver's hands trembling on the levers. You realize the line has blurred beyond recognition. Once, destruction felt targeted, purposeful. Enemy armor, fortified positions, military objectives. Now it is just rubble. Now it is just orders. The difference between soldier and civilian dissolves in the smoke. Each shot looks the same through the slit. Each impact feels the same through the recoil. Each kill, if kill it is, blurs into the machinery. The tiger has made violence into routine, into labor, into something indistinguishable from any other task. When the order finally comes to cease fire, the silence inside the compartment feels heavier than the battle. The loader slumps, his chest heaving, sweat dripping onto the shells. He has yet to move. The gunner closes his eyes, one hand still on the wheel, his shoulders sagging. The driver exhales through clenched teeth, his whole body shaking faintly from tension. The radio operator scrawls one last note, his pencil snapping under pressure, and you, gripping the hatch rim, stare at the slit of smoke and ruin outside. You do not know whether the ache in your chest is relief or sickness. You only know that something inside you has shifted, and you cannot shift it back. Later, when you climb out into the cold air, you hear the infantry again. Their voices are hushed, reverent. They call the tiger a terror, an avenger, a weapon that wipes out all resistance. They do not mention the children, the women, the old men. They do not know, or they do not want to. Their eyes glance at you with admiration, perhaps even envy, as though you're more than a man because you command the tiger. You want to tell them the truth, that you're less than a man now, hollowed out, reduced to a cog in a machine that kills without distinction. But you say nothing. Silence is easier. Silence is safer. When you climb back into the compartment, the crew avoids your eyes. No one speaks. No one asks questions. They wipe soot from their faces, shift uneasily in their seats, and resume the rituals of readiness. The silence speaks louder than words ever could. They know what happened. They know what they have done. And like you, they know they will do it again, if ordered. The tiger allows no refusal. The tiger ensures that orders become action, whether you believe in them or not. As the machine rumbles forward once more, its tracks clattering, its engine growling, you hear your own voice giving commands. The words come out flat, unfeeling, stripped of hesitation. They sound efficient, disciplined, correct. But as they echo in the steel walls, you realize they no longer sound like you at all. The silence after the firing orders is never complete. It hums in your bones, lingers in the barrel, echoes faintly in the cramped chamber of your chest. You think for a moment that perhaps it will allow you rest, some fragment of stillness in which your thoughts can settle. But rest does not come. Rest is a resource as scarce as food now, and food itself grows more elusive with every passing day. The quartermaster's voice was quiet when he told you, quieter still when he admitted he could do little about it. Supplies dwindle, the convoys arrive less often, fewer trucks, smaller loads, bread becomes hard, grey, tasteless. Tins of meat are rationed to half portions, then to slivers. Sometimes there is nothing at all. You and your men eat when you can, though eat feels like too generous a word for what you do. You chew at rations so cold they seem more ice than food, gnawing until your jaw aches, your teeth ringing with pain. The bread crumbles into gritty fragments that scrape down your throat, leaving a dryness water cannot quite soothe. The tins of meat carry a metallic tang that clings to your tongue long after you swallow. You eat in silence, no one daring to comment, each man bent over his portion as though guarding it from thieves. Hunger makes even the closest crew into strangers. You find yourself resenting the sound of another man's chewing, the sight of his hands tearing a crust of bread. But if food is scarce, fuel is guarded like treasure. The tiger cannot move without it, and the tiger is thirsty. Every march requires drums upon drums of fuel, each emptied into its veins like lifeblood poured into a patient that cannot survive on its own. The men mutter about it in hushed voices, their anger muffled but sharp. They see trucks unload barrels for the tanks while their own bellies remain empty. They see the mechanics fuss over the fuel lines, coaxing the machine to drink deeply, while they themselves lick at crumbs. The tiger must be fed before the men. That is the unspoken law of the front. The tiger carries the Reich's myth of invincibility. Men, after all, are easily replaced. You feel it every time you watch the crew pour fuel into the tank. The liquid splashes, the stench sharp and biting in the air, and you know the cost of it. Each gallon poured into the tiger could have been warmth for an infantry stove, bread delivered to a starving village, heat in the frozen barracks where soldiers huddle under thin blankets. Instead, it disappears into the belly of a machine that will only stall again, only break again, only demand more. You tell yourself it is necessary, that war is measured in machines now, not in men, but the words feel hollow, and the truth sits heavily in your chest. Hunger carves at the crew, gnaws at them like rats in the dark. The loader grows gaunt, his cheeks hollow, his once broad shoulders slumping. The gunner's eyes sink deeper into shadow, his hands trembling when he grips the traverse wheel. The driver's temper frays, his curses harsher, his patience thinner. The radio operator grows silent altogether, his movements slow, his gaze unfocused, as though staring through the static that fills his ears. You see them wasting away, their uniforms looser, their belts notched tighter. Even their voices change, thinner, rasping, drained of vigour. You see it, and you feel it in yourself too. The ache in your stomach that never fades, the weakness in your limbs, the way your thoughts drift sluggishly when you should be sharp. The cold does not help. Winter seeps through the tiger's armour, the steel conducting chill into your bones. Your breath condenses, clings to the walls in droplets that freeze and fall back upon you. Your gloves stiffen with frost, your boots soak with melted snow that seeps through seams. You huddle in corners of the compartment, trying to steal warmth from your own body, your arms wrapped around your knees. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow and cold, your teeth chattering even as you dream of heat. When the engine roars, the air warms briefly, but it is a choking warmth, thick with fumes, unbreathable. The tank cannot decide whether to freeze you or suffocate you. Outside, the landscape reflects your hunger and cold. Villages lie gutted, their stores long plundered, their wells frozen, their inhabitants absent or silent. Forests stretch barren, the trees stripped for firewood, the ground hard with frost. The road winds endlessly, a corridor of emptiness. You see no relief convoys, no wagons of food, no supplies destined for you. Only fuel. Always fuel. The barrels arrive with clockwork regularity, rolling across the snow like offerings to a god. The men stare at them with eyes that no longer carry envy, only resignation. They know who will be fed first. They know it is not them. The silence grows heavier as the hunger deepens. Conversation dwindles, laughter vanishes altogether. The crew speaks only when necessary. Their words clipped, functional. Even curses lose their heat, muttered half-heartedly under breath. The radio operator stops humming to his static. The loader no longer tells crude jokes. The gunner keeps his prayers to himself. The driver spits less often, his energy saved for the levers. You listen for voices sometimes, craving sound to pierce the silence, but none come. The tiger hums, growls, vibrates, but your men grow quieter by the day. Silence becomes another form of rationing, each word hoarded, saved, measured. When food does arrive, it becomes ritual. Each man eats slowly, carefully, as though stretching the moment. They chew longer, savour even the meagre crusts, closing their eyes for a fleeting taste of something that feels like life. You do the same. You chew bread until it turns to paste in your mouth, swallow with difficulty, sip water that tastes of rust from the canteen. The hunger does not fade. It never does. But for a moment, the silence breaks, the ritual of eating binding you together again. However briefly, then the food is gone, the tins empty, the crusts reduced to crumbs brushed from uniforms. Silence returns, heavier, for the reminder of what has been lost. The tiger continues to drink without pause. You measure distance not in kilometres, but in barrels consumed, in the weight of fuel spent to drag 60 tons of steel a few miles further. Each refill is a reminder that the machine is the true priority. The crew may weaken, may waste away, may die of hunger in their seats, but as long as the tiger is full, it will lurch onward. You begin to see it clearly, more clearly than ever before. You are not its commander. You are its servant. You feed it with fuel, with labour, with your men's strength, even with their silence. And in return, it grudgingly moves forward, demanding always more. You remember the words once spoken by officers about the honour of commanding such a machine, the pride of leading the Reich's greatest weapon. Those words feel like ash now, tasteless and empty. There is no honour in scraping frozen tins for scraps, while pouring barrel after barrel into a machine that never thanks you, never spares you. There is only servitude, quiet and grinding, the kind that eats at your mind, as surely as hunger eats at your body. The tiger consumes everything, and you, with your rank and your headset and your hollow voice giving orders, are merely another servant bent to its will. One day, you receive orders that carry the ring of desperation. They filter down through the static, through clipped transmissions and muttered confirmations until they reach your ears as nothing more than a blunt command. Push forward. There is no talk of reserves, no promises of relief, only the insistence that you must advance, must hold the line, must strike back. It is not a strategy. It is a reflex. You know it, and your men know it, but you obey all the same. The tiger growls back to life, coughing smoke, shaking with strain as though it understands what is being asked of it. The march begins under a grey sky heavy with snow. The air outside is sharp and bitter, though you only taste it in fleeting draughts that sneak through the seams of the hatches. Inside, the compartment warms quickly, not with comfort but with suffocating fumes. The loader wipes his hollow cheeks with a sleeve. The gunner flexes his trembling fingers. The driver sets his jaw tight against the levers. None of them speak. There is nothing to say. The Tiger lurches forward onto the churned road, its tracks biting into snow, crusted over mud, and you feel each vibration carry up through your spine. The machine moves but reluctantly, as though dragging itself to its own funeral. The battlefield greets you long before you reach it. The horizon is alive with artillery flashes, the dull thunder rolling endlessly across the frozen fields. Smoke hangs low, drifting in sluggish veils that blur the line between ground and sky. As you rumble closer, the air grows louder, sharper, filled with the scream of shells cutting through the wind, the whine of ricochets, the booming crashes of impact. The Tiger does not flinch, but you do. Every noise feels closer than it is. Every vibration feels like a strike against your hull. The world outside is chaos, but inside you are deafened to all but the machine's endless roar. The first Soviet shells arrive before you even see them. They slam into the ground nearby, throwing fountains of snow and earth into the air, pelting the Tiger's sides with clods and stones. The gunner steadies himself, eyes pressed to his sight, as the loader wrestles another shell into place. You issue orders, your voice hoarse but steady, though you barely hear yourself over the cacophony. The driver jerks the levers, swerving to avoid a crater, and you all lurch violently, shoulders colliding, helmets striking steel. Outside, you catch glimpses of movement through your slit. Dark shapes darting between wrecks, infantry spreading like ants across the snow, their rifles slung as they carry bottles clutched in gloved hands. Molotovs. The first bottle bursts against the hull with a sickening thump, fire cascading in orange sheets across the steel. Flames lick at the Tiger's sides, their light flickering through the narrow slit like tongues of some hungry predator. The driver swears furiously, the smell of burning fuel and singed fabric seeping in through cracks. The gunner fires, the recoil smashing through the compartment, and somewhere outside, a Soviet tank shatters into debris. But the infantry do not stop. Another bottle bursts, then another, each one erupting against the armour, the flames spreading in erratic streams that claw upward like desperate hands. The Tiger shrugs them off for now, but each impact is another reminder of how thin the line is between myth and immolation. Above, aircraft howl through the grey sky. The whine of engines pierces even the Tiger's roar, followed by the sharp whistle of bombs. Explosions erupt around you, the ground quaking, snow and mud spraying against your slit until vision becomes nothing but blur. The crew shout over the din, voices panicked, ragged. The loader curses as a shell slips in his grip, his arms too weak to steady it cleanly. The gunner snarls through gritted teeth, spinning the traverse wheel with what strength remains. The driver shouts about the tracks, his hands white-knuckled on the levers. The radio operator's voice cracks as he relays orders lost in static. All of them sound like men on the edge, frayed beyond repair. You try to focus on the rhythm, the loading, the firing, the recoil, the next shell. Each action blurs into the next, mechanical and unthinking. You do not see what you destroy, you only see the flash of the gun, the blur of smoke, the trembling walls of the compartment. Outside, men die, machines burn, snow churns into mud, but inside you're trapped in the same pattern, as if the Tiger itself dictates the war. Violence becomes motion, nothing more. Another strike slams against your side, harder this time. The entire tank shudders, the sound metallic and shrill. your ears ringing with the echo. The driver shouts that the track has been hit. For a moment, the Tiger lurches forwards stubbornly, its engine bellowing, its gears grinding, its weight dragging itself a few meters further. Then the vibration changes. It is no longer forward momentum, but a shudder. Uneven, halting. The tank stumbles like a wounded beast, then halts altogether, its tracks clattering once more before settling into silence. The engine growls futilely, but the Tiger does not move. Inside, the silence after motion is worse than the chaos. You hear only the hiss of your breath, the rasp of the loader's wheeze, the gunner's muttered curse, the driver's growl of frustration, the radio operator's broken transmission, fading into static. The world outside continues to thunder. Artillery, gunfire, aircraft shrieking, but your machine has stopped. The Tiger, the fortress, the legend, sits still in the snow, like a crippled animal. You glance through the slit, vision blurred by soot and frost. The flames outside still flicker where Molotovs burst. The wreckage of Soviet tanks smoulders in the distance, and infantry shapes press closer, darting between cover. You grip the hatch rim tighter, your knuckles white, your stomach sinking, with the realization you have always dreaded but never voiced aloud. The Tiger does not need to be destroyed outright. It only needs to be stopped. And now, in the snow and smoke, it has been. A crippled Tiger is a dead Tiger. You grip the hatch rim, staring through your slit at the haze of smoke and drifting snow, and you know that the legend has ended, though the battle has not. The first shell slams into the hull with a force that rattles every plate and rivet. The sound is deafening, metal shrieking as the impact reverberates through the compartment. You're thrown sideways, shoulder striking steel, teeth clattering together. Sparks shower from somewhere above, falling like stinging rain. The loader curses, scrambling to steady himself against the racks, while the gunner yells through gritted teeth that he has lost the sight. The radio operator clutches his headset, the static bursting in his ears, his eyes wide with terror. The driver mutters a prayer under his breath, hands gripping the levers, though the tank will not move. Another strike follows, sharper, closer, hammering against the turret with a ringing blow that leaves your ears shrieking with pain. Smoke curls into the compartment, acrid and choking, stinging your eyes until tears stream down your cheeks. You cough violently, the air filling your throat with the taste of iron and soot. The loader drags another shell into the breach, his arms trembling, his face pale beneath the grime. The gunner cranks the traverse wheel, but the turret responds sluggishly, groaning as though exhausted. He fires, the recoil smashing through the hull, and somewhere outside, a Soviet tank erupts into flame. But for everyone you strike, more remain, closing in, their shells hammering the Tiger from all sides. The compartment is chaos. The loader slips on the slick floor, the shell nearly dropping from his hands before he rams it home with a scream of exertion. The gunner curses, blood dripping from his scalp where he struck steel, his hands twitching with effort as he forces the traverse into place. The driver pounds the levers in frustration, his voice breaking as he tries to coax movement from a crippled machine. The radio operator babbles into his set, his words incoherent, static, and screams mingling into nonsense. And through it all, you shout orders, though your own voice feels distant, unfamiliar, drowned by the cacophony of steel and smoke. The next shell finds its mark. It slams against the side with a tearing shriek, splitting a seam and sending shards of molten metal scything into the compartment. The loader jerks backward, a cry tearing from his throat, his arm shredded by shrapnel. Blood sprays against the steel, dark and hot, spattering across the shells stacked neatly in their racks. He collapses into the muck of oil and sweat, clutching his wound, his breath ragged. The gunner shouts his name, a sound full of rage and fear, but there is no time to help. Another shell is already shrieking against the armour, Another impact rattling the walls until your teeth ache. The compartment grows darker, thicker with smoke. You can hardly see the men around you. Shapes blur into shadows, movements into flailing gestures. Your lungs seize with each breath, the air heavy with soot and fire, the stink of oil mixing with the metallic tang of blood. You gag, bile rising in your throat, but you cannot stop. The gun must fire, the tiger must resist. You order another round, your voice hoarse, though you know the loader cannot rise. The gunner snarls, grabbing at the shell himself, his body straining with the effort, and somehow he forces it into place. He fires, the recoil nearly throwing him from his seat, the roar drowning all thought. Another enemy burns, but the field is still full of them. A blast slams against the front, shaking the driver in his seat. He screams, clutching his leg where shrapnel has torn through, blood pooling on the floor. The smell of it mixes with the smoke until the air tastes of nothing but iron. He slumps, his hands slipping from the levers, and the tiger tilts further into stillness. You glance at him, his eyes wide and glazed, and you know he will not last. The radio operator shouts something, his voice high with panic, but you cannot make out the words. He is drowning in static, in fear, in the closeness of death. Another impact. This one bursts through, a glowing fragment tearing into the compartment. It ricochets madly, striking steel with shrieks, searing a line across the gunner's arm. He howls in pain, his face contorted, smoke rising from the scorched fabric of his sleeve. The loader groans from the floor, his breath shallow, blood spreading in a slick that coats the plates beneath him. The driver whimpers once, then falls silent, his body sagging. The radio operator bangs his head against the set in terror as he fumbles, his headset sparking faintly. You feel your throat closing from the smoke, every breath like swallowing knives. Your vision narrows, the slit before you, a blur of fire and shadows. Your ears ring constantly now, unable to distinguish impacts from your own heartbeat. You taste iron with every swallow, your mouth raw, your lips cracked. Your hands tremble on the hatch rim, but you force yourself to keep giving orders, even though your voice breaks, and you no longer know if anyone hears. The tiger groans like a dying beast, its walls shrieking with every strike, its breath reduced to smoke and fire. Another shell slams against the track, tearing it further apart, and the tiger lurches sideways. You are thrown against the wall, your helmet striking steel, stars bursting behind your eyes. The gunner collapses beside the breech, his arm limp, his breath rasping. The loader does not move at all now, his body crumpled in shadow. The driver is slumped forward, motionless, blood pooling beneath him. Only the radio operator still moves, his hands clawing at the static, his mouth forming words you cannot hear. You reach for him, but your fingers close on smoke. The walls creak and groan, each strike louder, each impact closer. You feel the tiger itself dying beneath you, its strength draining, its body collapsing. You are no longer a commander, no longer even a man. You are part of the machine's death, swallowed into its smoke and steel, its shrieks and sparks. The legend is ending, not with glory, but with choking air, with screams, with silence. The last thing you feel is the vibration of another impact. The floor shuddering beneath your boots, the walls trembling like the ribs of a giant. Smoke fills your lungs, iron coats your tongue. Your body sags with exhaustion. Around you lie your crew, broken and bleeding, their voices silenced one by one. The tiger shudders, sighs and stills. Its armour remains thick, its gun immense, its reputation vast. But inside, all is quiet, all is ash, all is ruin. The tiger becomes your tomb. The wreck is left where it falls, rusting slowly in the snow. At first it smoulders, heat radiating from its wounded hull, the scent of fire and flesh rising faintly into the winter air. Later, when the flames gutter out, the tiger becomes a monument of ruin, its paint scorched, its edges scarred, its armour gouged and blackened. Snow drifts against its sides, melting briefly against the residual heat before settling into crusts that cover the scars. Birds return cautiously, circling overhead, before settling on the barrel. Civilians pass at a distance, their eyes wary, whispering among themselves, but never approaching. For them, it is not a symbol of power or myth. It is simply another corpse, one more carcass on a battlefield littered with them. Time moves differently outside the tank. Days pass, then weeks. Snow piles higher against the hull, filling the cracks, muting the jagged scars where shells struck home. The wreck becomes a part of the landscape, indistinguishable from other burned machines scattered across the frozen fields. The men who come after glance at it briefly, some with respect, others with hatred, most with indifference. Few wonder about the bodies sealed inside. Fewer still consider their names, their stories, their exhaustion, their hunger, their slow erosion into silence. To those who pass, the tiger is impressive, but it is empty. It is not memory, it is just wreckage. But far away from the snow and smoke, the story takes on a different shape. In offices and press rooms, in whispers passed from one soldier to another, the tiger becomes a myth again. Reports speak of its thick armour, its monstrous gun, its ability to destroy enemy tanks in a single shot. They do not mention the broken track, the suffocating smoke, the men coughing blood onto steel plates. They do not recall how long the machine sat crippled in the road, or how quickly the Soviets swarmed once its weakness was revealed. They remember only the fire, the destruction, the fear it inspired. They polish the story until it gleams again, until the tiger is once more invincible. You are absent from those retellings. The loader's pale, trembling arms are forgotten. The gunner's curses, the driver's muttered prayers, the radio operator's hollow stares, none of it remains. No one will write that you ate frozen bread until your teeth ached, that you slept hunched against steel, that you tasted oil in every breath. No one will recall the silence that grew between you, or the superstition clung to in the dark, or the moment you no longer recognized your own voice giving orders. The tiger endures in story, but the men who lived and died inside it dissolve into absence. The armour remains, remembered and admired, while its crew are nothing more than numbers in casualty reports. Years later, when films are made and books are written, the tiger will stride across the page and the screen as if immortal. It will be shown flattening enemy lines, scattering infantry, shrugging off fire with contemptuous ease. Enthusiasts will study its specifications, marvel at its engineering, debate its flaws and virtues as though they were puzzles to be solved rather than burdens borne by flesh. Models will be built, displayed on shelves, painted carefully to mimic the camouflage patterns once smeared hastily in mud and whitewash. In these retellings, the tiger will never stall in the snow, never bleed oil across frozen ground, never sit crippled as its crew suffocated in smoke. The tiger will remain a legend, pure and terrible, a symbol of fear and awe. And you will not be there. Your name will not be spoken. Your face will not be remembered. You will not appear in the photographs passed down, in the articles studied by historians, in the films watched by curious audiences decades later. At best, you'll be a line in a record, a casualty marked by date and location, lumped with thousands of others whose stories blur into the mass. At worst, you will be nothing at all, erased by fire and silence, buried in snow that remembers only the outline of steel. The irony is sharper than any shell, heavier than any blow. You lived in the tiger, served it, fed it, obeyed it. You endured its hunger, its failures, its betrayals. You gave yourself to its myth, body and conscience alike. And yet, when it is remembered, it will be remembered without you. The taiga will be praised for its power, its presence, its supposed invincibility. You will be dust in the snow, forgotten even as the machine that consumed you is raised into legend. And that brings us to the end of tonight's slow descent into the life of a Tiger Tank commander. A world where invincibility was promised but never delivered, where steel consumed more than it protected, and where your name vanished quietly into the snow while the machine you served lived on as legend. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S. and Rich Davis. Sleep well.